I was running. Good morning, everybody. This is the day the Lord has made. Welcome, everybody. We're happy that you have joined us, whether you're in person or on Zoom. We're happy that you're with us today. And if we have any visitors that would like to introduce themselves, you could stand up and introduce yourselves. If you're shy, Coach Hudson, we're happy that you're here this morning. And how's your hand?
It's healing well, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I am shy, so thank you for introducing me.
Coach Hudson is the coach at Highlands University football team, so we're happy that he's here. He's been with us several times, so I'm just calling him out because I saw him walk in. Anybody else that wants to introduce themselves? Well, we're happy to have you. We hope that you will sign the friendship pads at the end of the pews, and that would be great. Robin will hand them around if you're new, and you can sign those. If you're online during the prelude, you can put your prayer requests in the chat, and then we have a place in the back in the narthex for the prayer requests as well. Take a minute to look at all the opportunities that are in the bulletin and look at that. So this Thursday we do have the choral and brass concert. The concert is free, but they're asking for a donation of $7. But if you do not have $7, just come to the concert. It's at Our Lady of Sorrows, and I think it's going to be really incredible. So we're happy to have that. This morning, so Katie and DR and Jordan and Caroline are all at Presbytery at Ghost Ranch. And so what Katie always says to session is, okay, this is an opportunity for you in the session to do the service, right? And so I was the only one from session that was able to help out today. So thankfully Sharon has stepped up. And what I think is really appropriate is that Sharon really started us out on the renewal with journaling at the beginning of our renewal season, and we're sort of coming to a close with that. And so today we're sort of looking at a lot of that. So I appreciate Sharon stepping up. We've got our tech crew and Jeff, who I emailed at like 10:30 last night and said, can you come and be here to try to help? But we've got Julie, Peter, and Judy on tech this morning. So listen to the prelude, focus your minds, and be with God. Thank you.
Let us make a commitment during this time to visit with someone today and wish them the peace of Christ. And in the meantime, stand please, face the back, and wish the peace of Christ to the people at home and then to each other. Peace of Christ be with you. Be seated. The service today is a little different than normal, so just kind of follow along with us as we go. The prayer for illumination is based on Psalm 56:3. Whenever I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. When fear becomes a driving force, I sometimes seek dark places and avoid the light. Places where it is close and final. Places where the voice I hear are the voices of doom and gloom. The light that is Christ is all around, but fear hustles me into that dark place. There I will be hidden and I think safe, but it is the great deceit. In that dark place, the voice of fear gets louder. Faith gets smaller. Only in the light that is Christ can the deceiver be exposed. Only in the light that is Christ can I find hope and healing, faith and renewal. In this time, Lord, open our hearts and minds to the light of your words and the message that hope is an action item. Amen.
Okay, so most of you know, but not everybody, because we have some new people in here. Most of you know that I spent most of my career as a professor. And I know that when I preached on August 6th, Rosie Lopez was zooming in and her son walked in and said, why is there like a lecture during church? So anyway, as Sharon said, we're doing things a little bit differently, and this is the only way that I feel comfortable. And so you guys just have to kind of go with it. So anyway, so I'm going to talk today, and actually I appreciate, I knew I was going to follow up on something that I talked about on August 6th, and if you weren't here on August 6th, that's okay. I'll just start in the middle and you can just follow along. And but Sharon really came up with this title of our service today is Hope is an Action Item. And I went, oh my gosh, like what I was going to say, how does that fit in what the service is? And then, I was like telling Peter, and Peter just said, you could do this, you could do this. I was like, okay. I will say that a lot of people don't think that Peter shows the most hope always, but really, he hides it really, really pretty well. So I want to talk today. And so the other thing is I just thought, okay, let me look up, because I'm a professor, right? What are the definitions of hope? All right, hope. to cherish a desire with anticipation, all right? To want something to happen or to be true. To desire with expectation of attainment or fulfillment. And this last one is my favorite, right? To expect with confidence. To expect with confidence. And what I will say is, if you can see that, what I've highlighted in red is those are all actions, right? Those are all actions. To cherish, to want, to desire, to expect, all right? So I thought that was helpful to look at that, all right? So not everybody knows in here, but most people know that what I worked on was, in my research that I worked on was male infertility and sperm development. And so I'm a cell and developmental biologist, and I studied actually sea urchin fertilization when I was a graduate student for my PhD. And then as my research program went through at Highlands University, I actually used mouse models of male infertility, and I talked about that on August 6th. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But one of the things that you do know, and so I'm not going to go into all of that, but you know, people go, why are you studying mice? Well, I don't really think humans want me to be taking their testes. I don't really think. So anyway, but there's a lot of similarities between mice and humans, and what we learn from mice we can actually apply to humans and human disease, all right? And then the other thing that when we think about this is that, and that's what I'm depicting in this slide right here, is that I'm depicting a sperm fertilizing an egg, right? The new life, all right? That's really the best hope, right? New life. But the other thing that I want to show on here, that we have millions of sperm, and I don't know, men, if you've heard this story or not, and most of you in here don't have to worry about that anymore, but I will say that the number of sperm over the last several decades has really been declining really precipitously, like by the millions, right? However, it only takes one sperm to fertilize an egg, right? It only takes one sperm to fertilize an egg. So what I've done, okay, now they told me that I needed to press and point to this screen over here, but Judy, can you just advance that slide, because I don't know why it's not advancing. Okay, oh, sorry, let me go back one. Okay, so now I will say that what I talked about a little bit, and I'm going to talk about again today, is I used mice and models of to study male infertility and really try to understand. Most male infertility, we don't know the cause, all right? We don't know the cause, and so what I was interested in is finding new genes and new proteins that were involved in sperm development. And so at the top, mouse sperm are very cool. The ones at the top are normal sperm. They have a nice little hook. The mice that I talked about in August are these mice that are called the Golga-3 Repro 27. I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. When you look at that, I don't know if you can see, there are very few sperm, and really maybe one that is normal out of millions. And so they are really completely infertile. All right, this other mutant that I worked on is this Repro 29 model that's right on the right in pink. And you can see actually that there are a lot of sperm. There's a lot of sperm, but if you look closely, which I can't zoom in on there, you can see that they don't have a normal head. So they aren't able to fertilize. And so the development of the head isn't normal, all right? So we talked about that. And so what I spent most of my time and what I talked a little bit more about in August was really trying to figure out, we identified that the cause for this infertility was this protein called Golga-3, which is a protein in the Golgi. And I really spent most of my time saying, okay, we make this protein in every cell. Why do you need it? Why do men need it in sperm development? And it's involved in a lot of different processes. And so I wanted to just touch on that. And then I want to really focus on sort of where I ended my sermon and went through, is that I really want to say is that we talked about our genotype, our genetic makeup, all right, our genetic makeup. But always, a lot of people talk about nature versus nurture, right? And we're always a combination of nature and nurture. We're always a combination of what happens in our environment. Now, sometimes our genes, you can't fight your genes. Your genes are your genes, right? But, and then, you know, the other thing that's on here that I want to point out, a lot of people will say, okay, behavior doesn't matter, your mental state doesn't matter. what I will say is for a lot of people that are sick or dealing with disease or how they handle things that are diseases that are genetically based, their brain and their mind does actually overcome a lot of things, right? So we can't forget that. So when we think about who we are, so our phenotype is who we are. Tall redhead, all right? That is, my characteristics are my phenotype. But the phenotypes could also be behaviors. It's whatever you decide, all right? Whatever you're looking at, all right? I was looking at male infertility, right? That's the phenotype. And so we can look at, in the case of my Repro 27 mice, I had a single gene mutation, all right? And then it led to male infertility. However, there was environmental factors, right? Depending on what strain of mouse that I put it on, they may make more or less sperm. The severity of the disease might be different. That's where the environment comes in, all right? But we have a lot of phenotypes, like height, colors of eyes, colors of hair. Those aren't single gene traits. They take a lot of genes, all right, to get that phenotype. And, you know, if you have the genes to be, I wanted to be taller, but if you have the genes to be 6'5", but you don't have the right nutrients and you don't get the right nutrients in the right diet growing up, you're not going to be 6'5", right? If you have the genes to be a great football player and you never practice and you don't have a coach, you're not going to be a great football player. That's your environment, right? And so we always are that. And people will say, oh, I'm not good at math, right? I'm not good at math. A lot of people say that. That's just because of their environmental. Now, some people may not be the best, but everybody can learn that. All right, so I added this slide, and I really wanted to think about, I talked about sort of this applied genetics in my last sermon. And I wanted to try to, and you know, these analogies don't 100%, I was up late last night going, these don't completely work. However, just go with it and just trust, all right? And so what I wanted to do was just say, okay, let's think about this as a congregation and who we are as First United Presbyterian Church here in Las Vegas. And so we have the people, all of you here, people on Zoom, people that were at Presbyterian today, people that are part of our community that don't necessarily come to church, people that have passed on. All of that and our environment are who we are. What missions we do, how we listen to the scripture, how we worship, our community, what our needs are, chance things that happen, like, well, maybe the fires weren't chance, maybe those were accidents. Accidents, age, as we all age with that. And so that is what makes us up, our environment, right? So we have individuals that actually are, the people on the tech crew, right? Now, people think, oh, I can never do the tech. But we've got some other people that volunteer to do tech, and then they go, what the heck did I get myself involved in? Right? But we've got people like DR that are patient and Jeff that are patient that are going to willing to help us out with that. And so there are things that we do that are individual things. Katie gets up and usually preaches every Sunday, right? And then we have things that groups do, like the deacons, all right? Like the deacons, like the meal distribution that we do at Rodriguez Park, right? And we're doing that in our environment and what we're called to do. And how we do that is always in our environment. So the other thing that I thought about is I talked about this in August, and I was really thinking about it because Sharon challenged me that I had to be hopeful, right? She said, you've got to be hopeful, you've got to talk about hope as an action item. And I'm like, great. And I am a hopeful, generally, overall, a hopeful person, right? But I talked about sort of this loss of function, right? And I talked about a loss of function and a gain of function. And I want to say, so these Repro 27 mice, they have a genetic mutation. They don't make this protein Golgi-3 that's in the Golgi, and the Golgi does all sorts of different things, which I talked about before. But if you don't have that mutation, you're fertile, all right? If you have a single mutation, so you're a carrier, you actually, males are still fertile, all right? You make some Golgi-3, you're still fertile. But if you have two mutations, if you're homozygous mutant, we call that, everybody's going to get a genetic test at the end of this, right? If you're a homozygous mutant, you don't make that Golgi-3, and males are infertile, all right? However, females are fine. And actually, all of the mice that are carrying both copies are skinnier when they're old, right? I mentioned that too. Otherwise, they're fine, right? And there are ways to breed and keep that going because you can breed carriers, you can breed females. So you're not going to lose that strain, right? So that's a hopeful thing. It's not so good for that mutant mouse. However, he may have a brother, right? And we do have assisted reproduction technologies now, right? I don't know if you follow all that, but I follow all that, and I'm not going to talk about that today. But otherwise, even though we have this loss of function, even though we have this mutation, right? And there are other examples of this. Cystic fibrosis is another example of a loss of function mutation. If you're missing 2 copies of that, or if you have mutated cystic fibrosis, you will get cystic fibrosis. But depending on your environment, depending on your drugs, depending on your diet, depending on whole different lifestyles, used to be people with cystic fibrosis would die in their teenage years, and now they live into their 30s and 40s, all right? So even though they're missing that, we have the ability, medical advances have the ability to deal with that. So that's actually, even though we're a loss of function, it's not really that bad. I don't know why that's not going, but go ahead and advance that, Judy. Okay, thanks. So, and I sort of made this, so I talked about this, and I sort of, what is in color, I added, all right? And so I had this, and I had these red X's on here before, and I talked about, okay, if you're if you don't have any mutation, nothing bad is happening, you're fine, you're fully engaged, everybody's here on Sunday morning, we have a preacher that's going to not go off to presbytery, we're thriving, we're fulfilling our mission, right? If you lose somebody, if you have something that happens, if something happens, you can still be fulfilling your mission, right? And I talked about this idea that if we actually, so today, right, we didn't have a preacher, all right? Well, okay, somebody else stepped up. So what I added to this slide were these green dots. These are other genes, other people that can step up, all right? And so what I said before is, are we going to, in this loss of function, that if you lose something, if you lose a pastor, if you lose your choir director, but what we know is every time we've had somebody step back as a choir director, somebody's come in, right? Isn't that true? I've been in this church for 26 years, right? We had Susan Swan, and then we had Carolyn Smith, and we had different people that have stepped up, right? So what I added to this, and really tried to think about hope, right, is that even though you may lose something, your body and our bodies, all right, it's amazing, all right? Our bodies are amazing. Not only are we made of trillions of cells, but we figure out ways to survive. Luckily, we wouldn't be here on this planet if we hadn't figured out ways to survive. So what I added is that we can, even though we lose something, there are other things that are going to step up, all right? Now, it may not look exactly the same, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to thrive. Let me see if, okay, yeah, sorry, I can advance, but, all right. So then I talked about this gain of function, this idea of gain of function mutations, and I said the gain of function mutations are mutations that happen, and we think about those a lot of time with cancer, right? A lot of times cancer cells know when to divide and when to stop dividing, right? I always was so curious because I'm like, how does a cell know? You are redividing. How does a cell know I'm just going to be a heart, right? I'm going to be a heart, I'm going to be this shape, and I'm going to have this many cells. How does it know to stop, right? Now we know muscles that we can build up. Usually when we're building more muscles, we're not building more cells, we're building up those muscles, right? So I was always really, really curious to say, how does that know? So we have these signals, right? We have these signals in our body and cells, that's why I'm a cell biologist, that say, hey, okay, this is the size you're supposed to be. You are not supposed to. You're supposed to stay where you are. You're a heart, you're a liver, you're a testis, you're not a prostate. You're not supposed to go outside of where you are, right? But then we have these mutations that are mutations so that you go, and they're called oncogenes. Have you heard of an oncogene before? Oncogenes are cancer-causing genes. And it's a mutation in a proto-oncogene before it's an oncogene, before it's cancerous. It's a mutation that says you should be dividing, and not listening to everything. So we also have these genes called tumor suppressor genes that also say, hey, you should stop dividing, right? So a lot of times in cancer, what we have is mutations so that our body is dividing, and it's not paying attention to these tumor suppressor genes that say, hey, excuse me, You're not supposed to be dividing, and you're not supposed to be going to the liver when you actually, a pancreatic cell, all right? And so that is that you're making too much of that protein, and then you can be healthy, but then all of a sudden you get to a disease state. Luckily, we have drugs that are now treating those kinds of diseases, right? We have drugs that go in and target those proteins and say, hey, don't do that anymore, all right? And that, I mean, that's one of the great things about what you're getting with chemotherapy now. Alzheimer's disease, there's new drugs for Alzheimer's disease as well, all right? Huntington's disease, that's definitely still a fatal disease, but they do have drugs that can, and they have abilities to treat that, all right? So I just kind of want to do that. Let me see if I can do this one more time. I don't know why it doesn't work. Advance that, Judy. All right. So then what I said was, okay, you can have a congregation that seemingly is, not doing that well, all right? We're not really, and that's not our church really. I will say, even although we've grown a lot smaller, right? Even though we're doing less than maybe when my kids were little and we had logos and we had a full church of children running around, that doesn't mean that we're not fulfilling our mission, all right? But sometimes we can come in and we have somebody like Jordan, right, that comes in and says, hey, he's got such a beautiful voice, he can write beautiful music. He can be that spark that says, hey, we've got a choir again, all right? And so that is really, really wonderful. So that's sort of the analogy that I made with the gain of function. So, okay. So then what I want to do is spend a little bit of time on this where we left off, where I sort of left my sermon before, is that I talked about, okay, and I talked about that Golgi 3 does this tracks things. And so the Golgi is in charge of doing all this tracking. So I'm not going to talk about that, but we have spent the summer evaluating what tracks, and there were a whole bunch of different tracks, right? We had great workshops, we had great music, we had great preachers that came in, different people that stepped up from the congregation and the community, and we are really at a point right now of what are we going to do? What tracks are we going to follow, all right? Where are those tracks going to lead us, right? And then I said, will we assume a loss of function or a gain of function mentality, right? Will we be hopeful? Is it an action item, right? What does that mean? So we had a retreat a month ago, and I'm not going to go through all of these, and they're kind of small, but we had this retreat a month ago, and a bunch of different people came. Just raise your hand if you were in the retreat. Okay, all right. So we had this retreat, and at the end of the retreat, we got into breakout groups, and people talked about we did a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't have time to talk about, but we talked about what would we like to see? What did we take? Are there things we wanted to continue with? Are there things we want to do things a little bit differently? What are we doing, all right? And so one of the things that we said is we want to continue the activities that are important to us. Now, they weren't important to everybody, but Zentangle, what was that called, Robin? Zentangle, but Zendoodle, right? Some of the Saturday workshops people really, really enjoyed. We had workshops that didn't go forward. Should we reschedule those? Sing more in worship. And actually, Katie and DR have taken that to heart. We are singing more, and we're singing songs that it says, sing songs that you're more comfortable with or something. That's on one slide here, right? And okay, so it says here, one was a suggestion to do 2 traditional services per month and 2 non-traditional services, and to make it participatory. That's what we're doing today, all right? That's what we're doing today, all right? So we're following that. So the other thing we said is we're not always, maybe sometimes it's good to be uncomfortable. Maybe you don't want me talking about sperm and testes in church, right? Like, what is going on here, all right? But it's okay, you're a little bit uncomfortable, but you're going to make it through, right? And so let's have some outdoor worships. Let's have some more dramatic readings with our scriptures. So Katie has been doing that. We talked about Nikki Sebastian and her Quaker service, and we said, some people said, oh my gosh, that 18 minutes that we were silent almost killed them, right? Almost killed them. Other people said, hey, that they really liked it, all right? And they appreciated her leadership. But what I loved about this in terms of the hope is that what was written down here is that the 18 minutes of silence worked because of Nixie's confidence. All right? And so what was that definition for hope, right? To expect with confidence, right? To expect with confidence. And so I love that. All right? And so there were other examples that are on here, and we'll try to get them into the newsletter. We had a lot of potlucks at the church, and maybe we do things a little bit differently there. All right? Ecumenical meals, overflow screen speakers to the kitchen workers. So actually we're doing that, right? Had a service at the Old Town Mission. I was at the Old Town Mission yesterday. Oh my gosh, it is so beautiful. I haven't been there since they put the whole new porch. It is just beautiful. It is an amazing. It was a great space for a meeting. It was just, the B&G has done, and Michael Longwright, I think, did that roof, right, over the kitchen. That's really, really nice. And a lot of us have been there over the last 26 years. A lot of people, Rudy Wright, worked on that for a lot of years. My kids worked on that and had that. All right, so those are just some things that we talked about with that. So what I want to leave you with, right, is that we're going to go into this time of reflection that Sharon's going to do. And if you don't have a paper and pencil, there's some in the back, and we're going to do that. But what I want to leave you with really when we're thinking about this is where we started at the beginning of this renewal. Do we feel renewed, right? Do we have new tracks that have opened up, all right? Where are those? We're not all, we're not the church that we were 26 years ago. But this church has been around for 150 years, right? And it always hasn't been the same, right? Used to have, when you look at the old pictures of all the old ministers, they were all men, right? We've had a lot of women ministers. The other thing that I feel so blessed in this church is that every time that we have had something happen, like when Randy came back, we were on a mission trip down to Agua Prieta with the kids, a youth mission trip. Randy came back and had cancer, right? And then he was like, okay, I'm not even going to do chemo. Judy convinced him to do chemo because we all need to do medical advances, right? He's still with us today, but people stepped in. People stepped in, right? Donna stepped in this summer, right? It was amazing, right? I just think about that, and I think that we really have to be hopeful. And I love this photo of Stuart Little, so I'm going to end with that. Thank you so much.
So just to kind of help you navigate what we're going to do now, I'm going to be reading the Bible verse. Then Em will play the song, and we'll sing just the verse that's indicated on your sheet. And then I will give you a journal prompt. Now, the journal prompt basically is what I wrote in response to the Bible verse. But I personalized it, and I would like for you to do that as well. I actually say I, Sharon, and then wrote the rest of the prompt. So we're going to begin with Jeremiah 29:11. I'm sorry, I'm not this Mike and I. Is it okay? For surely I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans for your welfare and not for harm, to give you a future with hope.
We're singing verse 2.
Now, I want to remind you that after the reflection, Carol is going to have the mic available, and you can share your thoughts that you wrote in your journal. You don't have to do that, but if you want to share that, we will have an opportunity after this exercise is over. I, Sharon, hope for renewed energy and will apply that energy in keeping with the gifts God has given me. It's your turn. You have about 45 seconds to write in your journal. Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. I, Sharon, rejoice that we have a church family. As a church family, face challenging times with hope as we continually pray for wisdom and guidance. Your turn. Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. I, Sharon, see hope fulfilled by turning challenges into opportunities to serve God by serving others. Your turn. Isaiah 40:31. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. I, Sharon, await with anticipation what God has in mind for me, trusting He will renew my strength and inspire my creativity. Your turn. Okay, thank you for participating, and I hope that you were able to jot down a few things in the limited time we had here, but it will hopefully enhance your journal keeping practice, and Carol will now proceed from here.
Okay, so I'm maybe on this log, right? And I have a handheld. And so if you're willing to share anything that you jotted down during that journaling, or if there's something that you wanted to share that maybe wasn't from your experience this summer, an activity that you had that you thought that really was something, or even if you weren't here and participating in the summer, if there's something that you would like to share, whether it was something you wrote or not, then I have a mic for you. You know what I was going to do is what you should never do this without getting people have already agreed to talk ahead of time, right? But I thought of that on Thursday, but I didn't do that. And so is there anybody willing? Rudy, thank you.
It wasn't a hope of mine, but during this session, I reflected on.
Wait, Rudy, hold on. Is that? It's on.
I reflected on the experience that I shared with Gavino Rendon Jr. and Susan Swan. It was their hope that the mission church should be restored. And they went through 10 years of planning and preparation of getting the work started, and they found a Cornerstone's Foundation, supplied them with all the technical help they need, and the World College students provided us with the inspiration that it took to get the work accomplished. And I think it was a good example of what Carol's talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Corky, you're on session, so you have to say something. He walked in this morning, I told him he was preaching. Oh, here, Richard, thank you, Richard.
Well, I don't know how many people know about this already, but the word is out. I spent our time of tracking going to 13 different churches in Las Vegas, or around Las Vegas, in a project I called Worship North of Mills Avenue and South of the Roundhouse. And that's where I was most of the time. I did come here 3 times for special sermons, so that takes care of the 16 weeks, I think, that we were on our own. And I put out a little handout on it, and there'll be something in the newsletter. But I was very impressed with the simplicity of worship in a lot of these churches. We do a very liturgical kind of formal thing, which we screwed up dramatically today.
You're the one that said, wasn't it your group that said 2 non-traditional and 2 traditional? Wasn't that your group in the breakout?
I don't think so.
Oh, maybe. Whose group was that? That was somebody's group.
Anyway, so these other churches weren't, quote, weighed down by calls to worship and opening prayer and closing prayer and this and that and the other thing. They kind of just went right to it and worshiped in a very simple and inspirational way. Now, having said that, coming back to this church and seeing what the structure adds to the experience, I can see both points of view. So it was quite a summer for me.
Thank you, Richard. Richard, aren't you going to talk about it in November?
Oh yes, that would be the 19th of November. Kent and I are going to be, maybe we'll have another friend doing it, but we're going to talk a little bit about the Sunday school class.
Oh, awesome.
Not so much about
Not
the
your
summer,
thing, Sunday
but we'll
school
be
class.
talking about the theologies of Bruce Springsteen, probably a little bit about the 1,000 gifts that we're studying now. This woman's generating 100 new gifts on top of the 1,000 every week.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Anybody else wants to share? Robin, did you want to say something? No? She said a prayer at the beginning of the service, so that was really, really nice. I like it. Deb, thank you.
Just to bail you out a little.
Thank you.
Just today, inspired by what Sharon was reading and what we were singing, I jotted down a few things. One was that a reflection of my own isn't prayer a form of hope? Because you have confidence that the Lord will hear you, or you would not be praying. And then in that last hymn, I felt it was a call for strength, a hope that the Lord will provide guidance. And again, why pray if you don't think the Lord's listening?
Yeah, thank you. That's really powerful, Deb. Thanks so much for sharing. Corky, were you going to say something? You don't have to. You could just hand it to your wife, who's the minister. So anyway, all right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you so much for sharing and listening and actually going with the flow. One of the things we did at the retreat also was go through and say what things are important to us in worship and what things aren't. And those of us that participate in worship every week and have been Presbyterians for a while, we think everything's important, right? We're like, well, we have to do that. We have to do that. So I think Richard's point is that, maybe we can worship a little bit differently. And so we definitely pushed that and did that. Sharon and I had that in our mind when we were planning the service. So thank you.
Someone asked me before the service, well, Charlotte asked me, what do you do with your journal once you're finished? Well, you start a new journal, for one thing. But the other thing is, I love looking back at my journals, whether they're my spiritual journals or my personal journals, just talking about my day, or my writing journals. And sometimes my mind just goes, I wrote that? I can't believe that. Or I remember that. I didn't remember it until I read it in my journal. So they are a history. They are a part of who you are. And so I encourage you, if you enjoy the process of journaling, to continue doing it. So with thanks for generous giving, thank you for continuing to support the ministry of this church. There is a collection plate at the back if you'd like to leave a donation today, or you can make a donation online or through the mail. Stand for the doxology, please.
You may be seated. During this time, we lift up the prayers from our congregation, and so continued prayers for for Elisa and all the family that she prays for every week, and be with all of her friends and family that take care of that. Lord, in your mercy. Prayers for healing for Renee from her hip surgery. And I did see her that she's online today, I think, right? So prayers for Renee and as she recovers from hip surgery. Lord, in your mercy. Prayers for Gail Malley, who now has tested positive for COVID. And I think Em and Kathy were there last week. And so we be with Gail. And as she recovers, you didn't give her COVID. No. Okay, I'm just checking. She maybe gave it to you. Okay, well, let's hope not. Anyway, prayers for Gail and as she recovers from COVID. Lord, in your mercy. Somebody put on here prayers for Augustus Linder, Augie Linder, my grandson. Peter's and my grandson, so definitely prayers for him, and he'll be here in a couple weeks, and so I'm excited about that. So keep Augie and Gabby and Charlie, and Katie and Maggie are visiting for the first time during this, they arrived yesterday. So prayers for all that family. So Lord, in your mercy. All right, so I want to, I will say the scariest part of being a guest preacher is having to do the prayers. And a lot of times, do you remember that Mary Shipper used to come up, right? And we would have somebody, and Mary Shipper always was like, yeah, I'll do that. She was good at that. So anyway, I don't have Mary Shipper here, but I'm doing this. But I'm going to borrow, I really wanted to share. So some of you know that my best friend that I grew up with is now the bishop of the El Camino Real Diocese in California. So she's an Episcopal bishop. And I want to share something that she wrote regarding the crisis in Israel and Palestine as our sort of prayers for the thinking about the world and thinking about that and thinking about where we are. And so I'm just going to read it as she wrote it. And so it's, when I say me, that's really Lucinda. So anyway, probably like me, you've been horrified by the sudden attacks between Hamas and Israel, that have left scores dead, destabilized the region, and brought terror to an already fearful situation. The history of violence between Israel and Palestine is layered and complex, and we must acknowledge that there is a very real danger that this conflict could easily become a regional conflict and a much bigger war. While many likely have well-researched information and firmly held opinions about this war, we know that as followers of Jesus, we must stand with the Prince of Peace and walk the way of love. This means that no matter our political opinions, we are called to tend to those affected by the violence, to those who are hungry, hurt, thirsty, and have no place to sleep. We are called to protect civilians and innocent people and stand where Jesus stood. Whatever prayer for peace you say or hold near your heart, I ask that these prayers be lifted and that the love of the risen one guide our every word and action as we tend to our world in turmoil. Now let us join in the prayer that our Lord taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, santificado sea su nombre. Venga su reino, hágase su voluntad en la tierra, como en el cielo. Danos hoy el pan de cada día, y perdona nuestras deudas, como nosotros perdonamos nuestros deudores. No nos dejas caer en tentación, y líbranos del mal, porque suyo es el reino, el poder y la gloria para siempre. Amen. Please stand for our closing hymn, and we're going to sing verses 1 and 2 in the Glory to God number 250. So our charge this week is to remember that we are not defined simply by our genes or what is happening in our world that is out of our control. Let us remember that hope is an action item. We need to cherish a desire with anticipation, to want something to happen and take action, to desire with expectation of attainment and fulfillment, and most importantly, to expect with confidence. Thank you.